Alright, sorry for getting this out a little bit late, but what I'm going to do is just run through an ERD that is going to be about as complex as we're going to get in this class. So the good news is that if you are able to go through this and you follow along and you understand everything, you'll be in a perfect spot for Lab 4 and also for the exam. So just to remind everyone, the exam is not going to have you make an ERD. It's going to have you read them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an ERD that kind of addresses a lot of the problems we had with that student database that we had earlier. So I'm just going to call this first entity here student. And we can assume we have a student ID of some sort. And now we're going to need a lot of attributes to describe students. So just like before, we want to get the first name, last name, as well as the middle name. We also want to get their address. We're going to have to break down address into its respective attributes. Then we're also going to need the social security number of the student. Probably also date of birth as well. So like I said, I'm just dragging on a lot of attributes here. And then I'll go through and fill all these attributes out with what they are. So I'll just do this for just a little minute. So we just put in first name. Now we do M name for middle name. And finally we'll do L name. Alright, we'll do add 1 for address line 1. Looks like we've got a little bit of overlap here with this other entity. Let's just move it over for now. Okay, so we have add 2, and we have city, state, and finally zip. Alright, so we also need to make sure that we're describing the student another way, so we're going to get their date of birth, we're going to get the phone number of the student, and finally we'll get a classification. We're going to talk about that classification in just a little bit. But for now, let's think about what else we need to have. So we need to have information about courses. And for now, we're going to have this be general information regarding a course. So it's going to have the course name, the course description, as well as the course subject. Alright, so let's just go ahead and put this up here. Whoops. Let's put this at the top here. Okay, so we have course. So for course, to identify a course, we really need both the subject and the course number. So in other words, BA by itself is not a unique course. 223 by itself is not a unique course. A combination of those two. So this is actually going to form a composite key with course num and course subject. So we're just going to move this line down, right click on here, set this as a primary key, and finally we need a course description, just something that describes what the course is. Alright, now this by itself is not going to tell us which sections are taught of a course. So what we need to do here is just add in an entity for section. Alright, and the idea is that each section is going to be unique. So there's a couple different ways we can handle this for the primary key. The first and probably the simpler way would be to use a single attribute called like course registration number, something like that, that's unique to each section of a course. So that's what we're going to do for this example. Now the other thing we could do is to make a combination of course number, course subject, the instructor ID, semester, year, and time. We can make the combination of those attributes form a composite key. The reason we're not doing that is because that gets a little bit complicated, especially when you actually build out a database with 6 different attributes acting as the primary key. That gets quite complicated, but it could be done that way as well. And I would certainly say neither is correct nor incorrect. Just different ways of doing things. So I'm just grabbing a couple more attributes here. So again, we have CRN uniquely identifying each of the instances of section. So we're also going to grab course num Okay, we're going to grab course sub. Okay, we're going to need to have the instructor of the course. Okay, we're also going to need to grab the semester the course is offered. And to grab the year the course is offered, as well as the time. And one last thing is going to be the room. So we can just get room, or we can call this location. Let's call it location. Alright, so let's go through this so far and see where our foreign keys are. So student ID pretty inarguably is originated in the student entity. Okay, course num and course sub are pretty inarguably originated in the course entity. So if we come down here though, we can see that we have foreign keys for course num and course sub because they originate inside of these course entity right here. So they're going to be a foreign key inside the section entity. So there's a couple things missing. Alright, number one that's missing is we don't have a way to tell who's taking what course. And if we think about that, we look at the relationship between student and section. And student takes one-to-many courses, and a section is taken by one-to-many student. So we have a many-to-many, so we're going to address that by using an associative entity between the two of them. And we're just going to call this registration. Okay, and just a reminder for the associative entity, what we do is we take the primary key from each of the entities involved. So in this case we have two entities involved, the student entity and the section entity. And we take their primary keys, so we're going to take student ID and CRN. They're going to come down here, they're going to be a composite key. Alright, so we're going to take student ID and we're going to take CRN, and that's really all we need here. So I'm just going to move this line down just that separates them. Now we know that they're primary keys, and we also know they're going to be foreign keys. So let's make sure that you set those as both primary and foreign keys, because again, they don't originate in the registration entity, they originate in student and section entities respectively. Alright, and then finally, we need to add information on here for instructor. Okay, because we have instructor in the section, we need to know who's teaching the course. Right now, we don't actually have a way to tell that. So let's just add in a new entity. Just drag a new entity on here. And there's actually a couple different ways we could handle instructor. So the way I'm going to do it right now is to make an instructor entity. But if you look at student, we could actually change student to be person. And down here, classification would tell us whether someone were a student, faculty, or staff member. Now, having said that, there's some downsides to doing it this way, and that's that a person can only be one thing. So that's why I'm addressing that by having an instructor entity. Alright, so we're going to make an instructor ID. We're going to need to know some information about. In fact, let's be a little bit lazy and let's just grab these entities, these attributes from our student entity. Let's just grab them. So I believe we can do this. Just grab all these, and I'm just going to copy them. In fact, instead of doing it that way, let's just copy the whole entity. Let's paste it over here, and we'll just rename what we need to rename. So instead of calling it student, we'll call it instructor. Instead of student ID, we'll call it instructor ID. Alright, I'm pretty sure that's going to be good for us. So, just to remind everyone, the attribute that is acting as a foreign key does not have to share the same name as the primary key to reference it. So down here for instructor, it's not called instructor ID, but it's going to contain the instructor IDs of who's teaching each section. Okay, so that's going to be a foreign key. So, now all that's left is just making our relationships. So I'm just going to go ahead and just plop some in here. We'll connect them up and set the cardinality and all that in just a little bit. But for now, I'm just plopping them all in. a little bit tricky to get them just plopped in here, but we'll do that for now. Okay, so we know that the associative entity for registration has a relationship with both the student and section entity. Alright, so let's go ahead and place this in here. Just snap it as best you can. Alright, so we're just going to snap it to both of these. Okay, so let's think about this. Student has one-to-many registrations, but a registration is going to belong to one and only one student. Okay, and we can tell that because student ID is acting as part of the primary key for registration, which means that a primary key cannot be null, and that means that it must be a minimum of 1. And we get the maximum of 1 from the fact that it's a single atomic value that's going to go into student ID. We're not going to have 5 or 6 different student IDs in a particular instance of registration. Alright, so let's go ahead and change that then to one and only one. Alright, and then the other side, student has one-to-many registrations. We can just tell that by the business logic that, to be a student you have to register for at least one thing, but you can certainly register for more than one thing as well. Alright, so that's kind of a given rule there. Right, come down here, we'll put in a relationship between registration and section. So it's going to be pretty similar to before. Section has one and only one-to-many registrations, but a registration belongs to one and only one section. So if you think about it, a section is going to have more than one student in it. So it's going to have more than one registration associated with it. But any given registration, because it has the primary and foreign key here down here as a CRN, you can only have it be belonging to one section. So in other words, in a given semester, any given student's likely to have more than one registration instance. But any of those instances only belong to a single course. So I'll go ahead and do that. Alright, so that's got that part of the cardinality good. Now, section and course are going to have a relationship. So I'm just going to drag this on here. I think I messed this relationship up, so let's add a new one. Not a big deal. Like I said, it can be a little bit difficult to snap. So let's think about this right here. So we know that looking at this, we have course nom and course subject. Those are foreign keys from the course entity. And any given section is only going to be a single course. However, a course is likely going to belong to more than one section. So in other words, what we're seeing is that from section to course, section belongs to one and only one course. So that's going to be one and only one. And then the other side is course has one-to-many sections. Alright, so that's what we're doing with that relationship. Now finally, a section is taught by an instructor. So we're just going to grab the relationship, connect it up. Alright, and let's think about this relationship a little bit. So instructor teaches, I'm going to say 0 to many sections, because not every faculty member teaches every semester. The section is taught by one and only one instructor. And again, we can tell that because we have a single attribute for instructor inside of section, which means that it's going to be taught by one person only. So that's pretty much how you would go about this ERD. Like I said, this is about as complicated as you're going to see in this class. Even for the project, I think this is going to be pretty similar to what you end up doing on that. So with that, thanks for watching. I hope to see you all Friday. I'll be around in my office hours if you have any questions, anything like that. Like I say, see you all Friday. Have a great day.